Hi, everyone. So we'll get started in a few minutes here. If you could just type in the chat bar if you can hear me and see me okay, that would be great. All right, so it's 1 o'clock. If there's any issues with technology, I'm freezing or anything, just put it in the chat bar and I'll try to monitor that. So welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about virtual funeral and memorial services. So this presentation was created by Peggy Sue, one of our CTS developmental service worker students, but she's completed her placement now. So I will be presenting it today. My name is Michaela. I am the bereavement program intern at Near North Palliative Care Network. And thank you all for being here. So it's just important to acknowledge that the land on which we live and work is the traditional territory of the Ojibwe of Nipissing First Nation on the region covered by the Robinson Huron Treaty. Alrighty. So the Public Health Agency of Canada has released a lot of information to all of the country in regards to how to stay safe and healthy during COVID-19. This does cause some restrictions, of course, as we try to contain the spread of the virus, as we have to do things such as social distancing, wearing masks, wearing protective equipment, those kinds of things. So these restrictions have an impact on the way we attend services such as funeral, memorial services, rituals. They affect the cemetery and cremation operations. So these restrictions are in place whether or not the individual died because of COVID-19 or something unrelated. So it's important during this time, if you're planning or arranging a funeral right now, to just make sure and check with your local public health officials, because as we know, some areas are in yellow restrictions right now, some are in stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. So always important to just check with your local health unit on what the restrictions are in your certain area. So that we're keeping everyone who attends services safe, so that we're keeping the funeral service workers safe, those sorts of things. So depending on the family situation, they may choose to put these services on hold for the time being and wait until they can have more people attend in person. I know some people are just having small get-togethers in the meantime until they can have something larger. But yeah, that's a little bit about the health and safety there. So this is a video from the point of view of a funeral home in the States and how hard it's been to adapt their services during COVID-19. Sometimes we forget, but these people really are on the front lines of this pandemic. So keeping them safe and them keeping others safe during the grieving and during the funeral process is super important. So I'm going to share this video with you. Let me know if there's any glitches.
I started going to funeral homes since I was 5 years old. I'm the fourth generation of the Refugio family, and I've been doing it now for 30 years. My family never talked to us about a pandemic virus that can affect the whole world or even our state. We learned everything in the business from them except this part. So we're trying our best. We are seeing an increase in the numbers of people passing away from heart attacks, from COVID. Up to now, everyone's doing cremations on their family members when they have the virus. When people come to viewings, it's for 1 hour, 10 people walk in the room. Everyone's got to be 10 feet apart. And it's a very cold scene when we see families that can't hug each other, can't hug their parents, brothers and sisters can't hug each other or console each other. And they're in the room 10 feet apart. And when we see that this part's new to us and it looks very cold, we get to cemeteries. And when we bring down the casket, only 10 people could go to the graveside on the grass, and they have to stand 10 feet apart. The rest of the family has to stay in their cars and watch the priest speak as from afar from their car. It's very new, very cold, very, very real. We chose to do this job, and we know we're at risk, but we're trying to help everyone in the community and society in the world. We are at risk, but the front lines are the doctors and the nurses and the police, firemen, and we got the back end of the front lines, but we know we're all exposed. We're trying to take care of ourselves and our employees the best we can.
All right, so as you can see from that, it is, I can't imagine how difficult it is for families right now, not being able to hug, to physically comfort each other, because that's a big part of grieving. So it just shows kind of how hard it is right now. So right now the recommendation is to have more virtual services and to avoid gathering in large groups, of course. So there's different options, such as recording a small service, whether it's, the immediate family gets together and they record something, speeches, things like that, and then make that available to the family and friends, as well as having video conferences. So this could be through Zoom or Skype, things like that, just to reduce the amount of people gathering for the in-person service. So with the help from technology, it allows people to still be part of the service that would otherwise have to miss it because of social distancing, because of health concerns, people who are at higher risk. This image in the bottom left corner is from an article that the New York Times did. It shows a family sitting Shiva, which is in Jewish traditions happens after the loss of a loved one. The family gets together for 7 days and prays and receives visitors. And usually, of course, that would happen in someone's home, but this family decided to do that over Zoom. Someone from the article named Eric Phillips said, "My uncle passed away on April 3rd from COVID-19, and my family couldn't grieve in person. We sat Shiva virtually for days. However, we did not feel robbed of a funeral. With Zoom, we could connect with family to mourn and remember. We shared stories, cried, laughed, and were reminded again how wonderful and supportive our family is. We even saw some benefits to virtual grieving. Geography wasn't a barrier to entry. Old friends who lived far away and may not have flown in were able to share stories many of us had never heard, leading to a deeper understanding of my uncle's life." So for that family, they found it really beneficial to have a virtual Shiva, whereas other people found it more difficult. So this one woman in the article said that losing our grandmother to COVID-19 has been devastating. Far harder, however, has been the inability of our family to physically gather and to have to postpone the opportunity to celebrate her life with a funeral. Ritual is the language of our souls, and the absence of this Mass leaves our souls speechless. So as you can see, for that family, it was really difficult to not be able to have that physical in-person service, which is a totally also a valid experience and extremely difficult. So this video actually came out before COVID, but the funeral industry is actually starting to do this thing called virtual reality funerals. So basically you feel like you're right there, and you can do different rituals like lighting a candle, viewing slideshows of pictures of the person, different things. So I'll just show a small clip of what this could look like for virtual reality funerals. Very interesting. So you can see the person's using the joysticks and to look around, and they would have the goggles on, or the, I don't know what they're called, that they wear to make it so that they can look around. And then I'll just fast forward here to, you can see what she's wearing and looks like. So that's her with the video game controllers basically, and her looking around with the glasses, walking up towards the front of the room. And you can see the slideshow going. So it really does make you feel like you're right there. Yeah, very cool. And then she goes on to do this. She lights a candle in memory of the person. Oops. So yeah, you can see like she's using the controllers to grab a candle and light it and walk towards it. Yeah, so it's very interesting, very innovative approach to virtual reality and virtual funerals. Let me pause it here. Yeah, so I'm not really sure if the virtual reality funerals are going to take off. It's a little bit unique. I'm not sure if that would be something I would want to do myself, but to each their own for sure. So globally, the numbers of COVID-19 cases are on the rise again. And as this happens, we have to find alternative ways to plan and host our gatherings like funerals and memorial services. So normally after a death, people would gather together to say goodbye to their loved ones and to show support to the bereaved people who are left behind. So because of COVID-19 and the restrictions like physical distancing, lockdown, stay-at-home policies in some areas, it really takes a toll on how people mourn and the ways that they can mourn right now. So therefore, we have a sudden demand to meet in alternative ways to conduct a service that is accessible to people and not restricting people who want to be able to attend but are unable to. So not being able to hug, to show physical affection to those who are mourning, maybe not even being able to see them in person. It can be so difficult, and I think we will start to see a lot more complicated grief because of not being able to have these rituals that we've had for so many years, and how our specific culture and society has done funerals and ritual services might just not be accessible or available right now during the pandemic. And that's a loss in itself, not being able to have those rituals. So with the spread of technology being available and access to the internet and global spread and use of laptops, cell phones, internet, this has made having real-time connections through voice and video technology almost universally accessible. We know there's still so many places that don't have this ability yet. However, with everything, of course, there are pros and cons. So in my opinion, there are some things that cannot be replaced virtually. I think although we're having virtual funerals and memorials, I think the strong lean will always be to be in person with the people who are grieving and with the families. So we also have to remember that there are varying levels of digital literacy, it's called. So basically, that's a term for how tech savvy you are. If you watched the Cyber Seniors presentation last week. And we have to be mindful of making sure we are providing resources to help people who may not know how to use Zoom or access to the internet or things like that. And as well, being mindful that technology costs money. Having internet, a laptop, it's expensive. Just some of the things we have to be mindful in this brave new world of technology. But of course, technology can be useful in many ways. So it's important to talk about what's best for the family, and remember that every family and individual is unique in the way that they want to conduct their end of life and memorials of people. So some questions to think about: do you want to be on video? Would it be more comfortable with just audio, recording speeches, things like that? Do people want it live streamed so that people from anywhere can join in the moment, or recorded so that it's available kind of forever? Just checking the chat here. Yeah, so really important to consider those things. So platforms such as YouTube, Facebook Live, Zoom, of course. The only thing is to always be mindful of the privacy settings and things like that, because with Zoom, we know that nothing is 100% secure, right? So we don't want people hacking into our virtual services or things like that. That would be awful. So just always being mindful of that, which I talk about in the next slide here. So there are companies that specialize in streaming virtual funerals that may charge a monthly subscription to the funeral providers, and they usually offer other services such as technology and equipment installation, online obituaries, memorials, and interactive viewing. If you are considering this but want an alternative that is free of charge and efficient, then it's good to talk about the use of free online programs such as Zoom. Just being aware again that those are not necessarily secure links, and nothing is 100% secure 100% of the time. So always being mindful of that. So safety measures that funeral homes have right now. So when arriving at the funeral home to receive services, it's important to know that many funeral homes are now limiting the amount of people they come into contact with, and will ask you to follow the social distancing measures, masks, hand sanitization, hand hygiene, those things. So the funeral home staff may have a screening process that they have to do, and may ask you about symptoms you've been experiencing, may ask about traveling, if you've been outside of Canada in the past 14 days, those kinds of things. They'll also disinfect surfaces, offer access to PPE, personal protective equipment, and hand washing facilities or hand sanitizing, depending on the requirements in their area. So when physical contact is necessary, possibly due to family's religion or culture, the funeral home has to work with those requests and find safe ways to do that. So this may be that the people who are touching things for rituals might have to wear gloves or hand sanitize right before that, just to avoid possible infection and keep everyone safe. So I had this experience earlier in the pandemic in June, where I had to attend a funeral home and a mass service. So it was very different. They had a checklist of people who were allowed into the funeral home. You couldn't go in if you weren't on the invitation list, basically, to limit numbers. Everyone sat 6 feet apart. Everyone except for the immediate family during Mass had to wear a mask. So it was a really difficult experience, and I can imagine very frustrating for the family. That's what we're hearing in our grief and bereavement services right now. People not being able to go to the funerals, having to wear a mask during the funeral. It's just all very complicated and frustrating. So I'm sure you've all heard of the drive-by birthday celebrations that people have been having. And a lot of people use this idea to start doing drive-by celebrations of life or memorials. So this is a photo of a family in Ottawa that did this. So they just had their close family stand around while people drove by and said their condolences to the family at a safe distance, of course. So it's a really nice idea. Maybe not feasible in cities like Toronto or Ottawa, but or the outskirts of Ottawa is probably fine. But where we are in North Bay, Northern Ontario, this would probably be a pretty feasible thing to do. This is what my friend's family did for her dad. They had this set up with, his truck with pictures, and there was probably 150, 200 cars that drove by the family and said their condolences. And it was a really nice way for them to see everyone, to see the support behind them while still following COVID-19 guidelines. So there are safe in-person activities. So, all right, any questions from anyone? If you'd like to put them in the chat bar, that would be awesome. Or I can also unmute you if you type in the chat that you would like to be unmuted. I'll give a minute here. But if not, thank you, Carla. I've heard of people feeling left out of funerals. Any comments? Yeah, so I feel like it's really hard for people, I think, right now for families. I've heard of them trying to consider everyone that they need to, so speaking from personal example with my friend, they were only allowed to invite 25 people to the funeral service. And that was really difficult because they literally had to narrow down, who they could invite, and people who assumed they would be invited, weren't invited. It's kind of like a wedding. Who are you going to invite? Who are you not going to invite? And, the emotions are even heightened around death. So I think finding ways to include the people that can't necessarily be there. So maybe sending out like little obituary cards to those people, or doing the drive-by service, or saying, we'll have something at a later date that everyone can do. And I think people maybe having an option for people to still, how people deliver flowers and things like that to the funeral home, they might not be able to do that now. So I think finding creative ways for people to be involved, like, oh, you can donate to the hospital that they were in, or to a cancer society, or things like that. But it is difficult. People are definitely, I think, feeling left out, and it would be a terrible feeling. I can't imagine. So yeah, if you're working with bereavement clients like that, yeah, discussing with the whole family. Yeah, Doris is saying at my cousin's on the weekend, everyone kept their distance and a lot didn't show up. Yeah, it's hard. Some people who are invited may not come just because of safety concerns, and that's also difficult for the family. The family might feel like, why did these people not come and just, there's a lot of restrictions for sure. So yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. And yes, Carla's saying technology is a double-edged sword. Definitely. Yeah, we see that with social media. There's so many ways to make connections and to connect with people from all around the world. And we look at globalization, but then we see the mental health effects on young people. So double-edged sword for sure. Are funerals less expensive regarding COVID? I'd imagine that funerals would be less expensive I think depending, because like personally from our experience, we couldn't have like a lunch, which costs a lot of money. We couldn't have like a after celebration with drinks and things like that. So I'd imagine those things cut down on the costs. But in regards to using the new technology, like live streaming services, I would imagine that would be pretty expensive. So again, double-edged with the technology. Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for coming and for the questions and discussion. So if you have any other questions, you can always call me or email me, bereavement@nnpcn.com. But yeah, have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk to you all soon.